taken from the book of Colossians, chapter 3, verses
12 through 21. Reading from the English Standard Version. Put on then, as God's chosen ones, holy and beloved, compassion, kindness, humility, meekness, and patience, bearing with one another, and, if one has a complaint against another, forgiving each other, as the Lord has forgiven you, so also you must forgive. And above all these, put on love, which binds everything together in perfect harmony. And let the peace of Christ rule in your hearts, to which indeed you were called in one body. And be thankful. Let the word of Christ dwell in you richly, teaching and admonishing one another in all wisdom, singing psalms and hymns and spiritual songs, with thankfulness in your hearts to God. And whatever you do, in word or deed, do everything in the name of the Lord Jesus, giving thanks to God the Father through him. Wives, submit to your husbands as is fitting in the Lord. Husbands, love your wives and do not be harsh with them. Children, obey your parents in everything, for this pleases the Lord. Fathers, do not provoke your children, lest they become discouraged. Let's give attention now as Pastor comes with the morning message.
Good morning to you. I had such a good response last week to the message on attitude that I decided to extend our New Year challenge to family this week. Two greetings that most of us exchange when we meet each other are these. Someone will ask, well, how are you doing? And you'll probably say, fine. And then if they know that you have a family, they usually ask, well, then how's the family? And you will say, fine. But there's no really measurable exchange in that greeting that's going on, and especially in the second one. For example, if you really wanted to know how the family was doing, you probably wouldn't be able to really determine how well they are doing. By what criteria would you measure it? And actually, the person being asked the question doesn't probably know how to determine how well his or her own family is doing. Maybe as the new year rolled around, some of you are thinking, well, things have got to be new around my home this year in 2016. I need to put a higher priority into my family. I've got to get more involved in the family. I need to make some changes within the family. The question is, how do you know what changes to make? How would you know at the end, for example, of this year, 2016, if you did anything different or anything better than what you did in the year 2015? If someone should ask you at the end of the year, how's your family, would it really be better than what it was at the beginning of the year? And how are you going to know if that be the case? Well, I'm going to help you this morning. By the time you walk out of the doors this morning, you're going to have a numeric evaluation about the health of your family. I want to share with you 10 characteristics of a high-functioning family. And I'm going to ask you to score yourself so that when someone asks you after the service, how's your family, maybe you'll be able to say, oh, it's about a 6, but I hope by the end of the year it's going to climb to an 8 or a 9. And you'll have some criteria that you'll know exactly how to determine where your family health is. Now, I'm aware that some of you are single this morning, some of you are young people, and you're not raising any family right now, but nevertheless, the message that I have for you today can still be of importance to you, because you can assess the family that you grew up in or the family that you currently are growing up in. And that's pretty important data for you to have and for you to understand. And then I know that some of you are grandparents, like I myself, and you want to rate the family that you're involved with as grandparents. So, for the sake of time, let's jump into these 10 characteristics that I want to share with you this morning of a high-functioning family. And because we have 10 points to cover, it's going to be a little longer than normal, but hopefully the content will be good enough that it will captivate your attention. And besides, what else do you have to do on this rainy day? So, let's get into that. Now, number one, the first characteristic of a high-functioning family comes from a statement that was made by a sociologist by the name of Dr. Urie Bronfenbrenner. Now, I know you'll never be able to repeat that name. I can hardly repeat it myself. But he was asked, why are family memories so powerful, and why are family systems so determinative of future health? And he responded with this statement that I have on the board for you behind me. Because the family is the only unit in society that demonstrates irrational levels of commitment to each member of it. And he went on to explain, they're crazy about each other. Now focus on that irrational level of commitment. With that in mind, the first characteristic of a high-functioning family, and I hope that maybe you'll write these down and refer to them, and I want you to give yourself a numeric number in regards to the grade that you have in these areas. But the first thing that I want to say of a high-functioning family is that they display an irrational love to each member of the family. They're crazy about each other. I often watch the interaction between Paul, Sissy, and Andrew Wong with Jenna. Jenna has autism, and her condition displays itself in unconventional behaviors in ways. But the love that Paul and Sissy and even Andrew, her brother, shows her is just phenomenal. I call it an irrational love. They're crazy about her. And Jenna can't help but feel that love. She sees it. When we were raising our boys and at night I put them to bed, I'd go into their bedroom and after prayer, I would whisper in each of their ears. Every night I did this. If all the little boys in all the world were lined up, and I had to choose one to be my son, I would choose you. And they giggled, laughed, but I wanted them to know that they were loved and wanted and very special to me. It's an irrational love. I'm crazy about them, and to this day, now that they're 41 and 38, they would still be my choice. The other night I was putting Morgan, my grandson, to bed, and I whispered those same words in his ears. I said, if all the little boys in all the world were lined up, and I had to choose one to be my grandson, I would choose you. And he just beamed from ear to ear. And then he said, but Grandpa, what if there was somebody that was more important than me? I said, I would still choose you because you're the one who was most important to me. And with that, he snuggled under the covers and went right to sleep. Now, for a moment, think of the word treasure. And here's the question. Were you treasured irrationally in the family that you grew up in? Or right now in the family that you're raising, are you showing irrational levels of love to your family members? Are you crazy about them? And they know it. How would you rate yourself? The family you grew up in or the family you are raising right now? Would it be high, somewhere in the middle, or love? On a scale of 1 to 10, put a numeric number on this area of the irrational love. And then number 2, the second mark of a high-functioning family is that they communicate. And they communicate to one another with truth and grace. In other words, they communicate openly, and they communicate truthfully, and yet gracefully. Now this comes right out of the Bible in Ephesians chapter 4 and verse 15. It says, speak the truth in love. And it's saying that our communication with one another ought to be marked by truthfulness, but it also needs to be marked with a gracious and loving spirit. Now, in some families, there are only truth tellers. They're almost too truthful. They like to tell it like it is without any feeling for how the other person is taking it or hearing it. They almost brutalize each other with truth. And then there are other families who are only gracious. They don't say the truthful things. They don't want to rock the boat or create any waves. And so they show a lot of grace, but no truth or low truth. A lot is not said or kept in. And healthy family systems, when they look at the studies by universities and sociologists on what really makes a high-functioning family, they find that open communication with a balance of truth and grace is the key. Now, statistics will show that a relationship that establishes the communication pattern for the family tends to be the relationship between dad and mom. If dad and mom can talk openly and truthfully with each other, if dad and mom can listen lovingly to each other, if dad and mom can say difficult things to each other in gracious ways, if dad and mom can resolve conflict through gracious, truthful communication, there's a high likelihood that those values are going to become operative in the rest of the family. When I was first starting out in ministry, I was a youth pastor. And many of the teens would talk to me about issues that were going on in their lives. And I would ask them, have you ever talked to your parents about this? And I remember their responses. They would say, well, I tried, but my dad travels a lot and he's hardly ever home. Or I tried, but my mom works and she's so tired and really doesn't have time. Or they said, I tried, but they got real mad. Or I tried, but they really didn't listen. They just gave me a lecture. And so then they would say, I don't try anymore. I know of a man, and I would have to say that this man has poor communication skills, especially with his family. He's not always clear, and most of the time he's just quiet and doesn't say anything when he needs to say something. And I discovered that his father was a raging alcoholic who would come home and drink every night. And when his mom would try to say something, he would tell her to keep quiet and to shut up. And so during this man's growing up years, his dad was passed out in a chair drinking, and his mom kept quiet. And so there's no wonder why he doesn't know how to communicate very effectively. He never saw a decent pattern of communication in the home. I know a woman who gets very anxious whenever the voices raise and the animation level goes up when she's in a committee meeting. She'll cringe and then just shut down. Well, come to find out, she grew up in a home where her parents fought all the time, screaming at each other during their growing up years. And so whenever she senses any tension in relationship, she just freezes. You see, healthy families learn how to communicate with each other. And they learn to communicate with grace and truth, and they learn to communicate at a pitch that is pretty even keel. And healthy families decide when and where they're going to communicate. whether it be around the dinner table, or whether it be at bedtime, or whether it be on Saturday morning breakfast, or whether it be at some kind of family meeting that they call, but they learn that it's essential that all the family members communicate. And so, how open is the communication level in your family? The one you grew up in, the one you are leading right now. How freely were or are you able to talk? Did or does it happen with truth and grace? If high, give yourself an 8 or a 9 on this one. If medium, give yourself a 5 or a 6. If low, give yourself a 4 or below. Now, the next trait of a high-functioning family is that they affirm the value and the uniqueness of everyone in the family. Each person is valued in the family just the way they are and the way they were made by God. Sometimes I think God has a sense of humor, how he places opposite personalities in single family units. When we were raising our family, and for example, we would try to figure out where we're going to go on vacation, Sue wanted to stay in a hotel. I wanted to camp. Ted wanted to hike or go mountain biking or some other fast activity. Todd wanted to sit and read a book. And it was sometimes frustrating to get us all together and agreed as to what we were going to do and where we were going to go. When we wanted to go out to eat at a restaurant, Sue wanted a sit-down restaurant where she was waited on. Ted wanted buffet, where you could eat all that you want. Todd wanted hot dogs and only hot dogs. I wanted cheap. And it was sometimes frustrating, again, to find a place where we were going to eat. Sunday nights were pizza and movie nights in our house. And Sue wanted romantic love stories. Ted wanted fast action, police chasing, shootouts, bombs, and explosions. Todd wanted mystery, Sherlock Holmes type, and documentaries. I wanted history and true life stories. See, we all looked at things differently. And it was quite a challenge at times to work through those differences and to come to a place of accepting and valuing and celebrating the uniqueness that each one brought to the family. Rodney Clamp, a Christian author, writes, "Family is God's training camp, where we learn how to accept and appreciate and even celebrate the uniqueness of each one in the family, so that once we've learned how to do that, we can move out into a world that desperately needs the love of Christ." You see, there are going to be differences in the family. And these differences are going to stretch your capacity to love. But as you learn to accept and appreciate those differences within the family, you're going to be able to take it into the workplace or into a neighborhood. And where you have a co-worker or a neighbor that's different from you, you'll be able to accept him or her or get along with him and her. Why? Because you had someone just like them in the home when you were growing up. What is God trying to do within the church? Well, he's trying to increase your capacity to love him, but he's also trying to increase your capacity to love each other. And within this church, we have a large diversity of personalities. But the family is the perfect training ground to increase your capacity to love. So I ask you, were or are the various uniquenesses of the people in your family celebrated? And how would you rate yourself on that? In high-functioning families, uniqueness is accepted and appreciated. And then number 4, high-functioning families allow that they will never abuse, shame, control, or intimidate each other. Now, healthy families realize that there are certain kinds of violations in the family that do so much damage to a family member that the family makes an absolute, categorical, uncompromising law saying, we will never abuse or shame or intimidate members of our family. There are people who study family systems and the good that come out of the family as well as the damage that can come out of the family. And they find that the most deeply wounded people walking around in the world today are not the people who have unfortunately been mugged or have seen the horrors of war, as awful as some of those things can be. The most damaged people are those who have been damaged in the family. When a child reaches out, yearning for emotional support from a parent, and instead gets mocked or scorned or laughed at. When a child is yearning for some tender words from a parent, and instead gets raged at in anger. When a child is yearning for a nurturing hug, and instead gets a slap across the face. There's more going on than physical damage. That child's soul is getting damaged, sometimes permanently. So when it comes to those who are capable of doing the greatest damage to a person, it's family members. A family can bring shame into a person's life. A family can bring intimidation into that person. A family can bring fear of tremendous sorts. And when you read the data, you find that the highest functioning families are families that make a vow with each other. And they assure each other that words or behaviors or attitudes or practices that would damage another's well-being or self-esteem or self-worth will never, ever happen in the family. And they stick with that vow. So along these lines, the next question that I want you to rate is, how safe from these kinds of things was your family that you grew up in, or is your family today? If you are grading your own current family, do your children and everyone in the family feel safe with each other from these kinds of things? Or are they hiding because someone might break out with a rage of anger? Or are they cowering because someone is going to intimidate them? Or are they going around with stooped shoulders because someone has shamed them? High, medium, low. How would you rate this one in your family? And then, number 5, believe it or not, even secular research agrees that high-functioning families share a common spiritual belief system. A common spiritual belief system. Now, the Bible teaches this from cover to cover. It says that parents of faith ought to live out their faith genuinely before God. And at the same time, they ought to do everything in their power to instill that faith in the life of their children. Now, this is one of the highest priorities that the Bible teaches about what a parent ought to do. Look at this in Deuteronomy chapter 6 and verse 5 to 7. It says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And these commandments that I give you, God is speaking, are to be carried in your hearts. And you are to impress them on your children's hearts as well. You're to talk about them when you're sitting at home and when you're walking around the road and when you lie down at night and when you rise up in the morning. Now this passage is saying, parents, you're to live out your faith genuinely before God, and you're to pass that faith and love on to your children. And it even gives you a strategy. It doesn't say, you should hold weekly indoctrination classes in which you fill your children's heads with all kinds of knowledge of the Bible. But it says, throughout the normal course of life, when you're together as a family, you should have conversations with them about the God you love. For example, if you happen to be driving west in the car and there's a beautiful sunset before you, say to the family, hey, look at this. This is what God made. And this is what God has given us to enjoy this evening. Or when someone's going through a hard time, gather the family together and say, hey, we're going to pray about this because our God has the power to do something about it. And then you all bow your heads in prayer and cry out to God. And see, through the normal course of life, you're rising up in the morning, you're lying down at night, you're walking along the road going from place to place, you talk about God. Family members need to be constantly reminded of God, of God's love, of God's joy, of God's wisdom as found in the Bible. One of the greatest priorities of a Christian family is for a dad and a mom to live out their faith in a genuine way and to impress upon their children in a natural way the difference that faith in God can make. Now what's interesting is that when you read the secular research on the family, the data shows that families with no common faith pay a huge price. And usually here's how it goes. Dad will sit on one end of the table and he'll make a right and wrong judgment statement of some kind. He'll say, I don't think there's anything wrong with, and he'll name something. Well, Mom is on the other side of the table, and she vigorously disagrees. And she'll say, well, I think there is something definitely wrong with, and she'll name. And then the kids are in the middle, you see, and they're wondering, who's right, Dad or Mom? Whose truth do we believe, Dad or Mom? And before long, the kids grow up, and they come to their own conclusions about what is right and what is wrong. And you have every person in the family doing what they think is right according to their own eyes. I remember a father who wanted me to talk with his son. The son was about 18 years of age and was living with the father. The father and the mother were divorced, and he was living with the father. And the father was upset because the 18-year-old was bringing young women to the house to stay overnight on the weekends. And the father didn't think that was right. And while we were talking with each other, the son said, well, Dad, how come it's right for you to bring your dates home over the weekend? At what age does it become right for you to do that kind of thing? And I'm standing there thinking, this family is not on the same page spiritually. And families need to be on the same page spiritually, or there's going to be anarchy in the family system. And so grade yourself on this. Either the family you grew up in or the one you currently are in, is God and His Word playing a central role in your family system? Give it a high or a medium or a low. You know, one of the greatest gifts, while I'm talking about that you can give to your family and to future generations is to follow a rich, or to give a rich spiritual heritage where God is at the center of your family. Where Jesus Christ is the acknowledged Savior. Where the Bible is accepted as the book that teaches right and wrong. If you make that the core of your family, it's going to provide a strong spiritual faith that will bind your family together. And I would say that's why you need to make Sunday morning worship a strong priority. Family that worships together is going to stay together. And then number 6, high-functioning families teach respect for other people. Teach respect for other people. Prejudice is a learned behavior. And most of that learning happens in the family. You get out your ideas and how you think about people who are different from you, namely from the family. Now, healthy families, high-functioning families, establish the principle of respect for other people early in life. And that becomes a core value for all their life. In our family, whenever we noticed a person who was different or of different ethnicity, we make a positive statement about him or her. One of my wife's friends have 2 mentally challenged sons who we have known since they were very little. They are now 51 and 50 years of age, but they have the mental capacity of about a 4 and 5-year-old. And throughout their life, they've been ridiculed and called all kinds of names, mostly retard, by people who should have known different. But our sons grew up, they knew him, and we taught them, whenever you see Mike and Dave, or anyone with a disability, you move toward them, not away from them, and you express love for them. My daughter-in-law has a brother with severe Down syndrome. And it's awkward at times. My grandchildren don't always know how to respond to him. But my son and daughter-in-law tell them whenever there's a family gathering, now you go to Uncle Mike and you say hi, and you talk as best as you can with them, and you shake his hand, and you put your arms around him and give him a hug. They want him to know that he's accepted. You see, respect for other people should be a very high value in the family. But it has to be taught. You have to teach your family to respect those in authority. You need to teach your family to respect employers. Teach them to respect teachers. Teach them to respect property. Teach them to respect people of different races than you are. Teach them to respect people who are richer than you. Teach them to respect people who are poorer than you. A value in our home has always been, you have never looked into the eyes of someone who does not matter to God, no matter who they are. Everyone you have eye contact with is someone for whom Christ shed his blood and died. Now, it was that value that took us to the Philippines as missionaries to work with the street children there who had been discarded by their parents. Respect people. And as you do, you will raise up generations, you will raise up children who talk respectfully and who live respectfully in their world. And we desperately need that in our day. So when it comes to this whole subject of differentness and teaching respect, how's your family doing? High level, medium, or low? And then number 7, high-functioning families instill a sense of responsibility in each family member. In other words, they don't let family members off the responsibility hook. Choices that are made, decisions, finances, keeping a commitment, truthfulness, reliability, trustworthiness, it all has to do with responsibility. When a son or a daughter says that they're going to be home at such and such a time, you need to hold him or her responsible. When a father promises that he is going to do something with the family and doesn't fulfill it, he needs to be held responsible.
We're to hold responsibility very high, because the bottom line is character. And character counts. I remember one time when my sons were about the ages of 14 and 11. They asked a neighbor, without our permission, if they could borrow her boat and go out on the lake fishing. We live on a lake up there in Woken. And the neighbor gave the permission, and they went out. In the middle of the lake, they decided to change positions, one moving to the front of the boat while the other moved to the back. And during the move, the boat tipped. Now, both of them were avid swimmers, but the boat began to sink. And they tried to save it, but to no avail, it sunk to the bottom. Someone at the lake rescued the boys and brought them to shore, and later they made attempts to find the boat, but they were not successful. And I told them they had to take responsibility for it and tell the neighbor exactly what happened. And so they did, and she demanded that they replace it, telling them that the boat was worth $500. Now they protested, but I told them they had to take responsibility for their actions and pay the neighbor the money, and it wasn't going to come from my pocket. Now they both had paper routes at the time, and so it was painful that they had to take their hard-earned money over to the neighbor every single week until their $500 debt was paid. But they learned a lesson in responsibility and character through that they have never forgotten to this day. And you know what? We need to hold each other responsible, because if you don't, you're going to develop irresponsibility in your family members and poor character that will heap a whole bunch of trouble in their lives later on. So how is your family doing when it comes to character training and this whole area of responsibility? Give it a rating. And then number 8, research shows that healthy families play together and have fun. Often when you ask people to describe a warm memory that they had from their childhood, they'll often say, oh, it's when we went camping and the tent blew down and we all scrambled, or when we took family bike rides, or when we played games, or when, and they'll describe some other kind of fun activity. When the fun factor is high, getting to know each member of the family is high. Because when you're having fun together, the defenses go down, and the relationships go up, and the conversations go up, and there's a freedom that you don't otherwise have. And pretty soon you're talking about things that you wouldn't ordinarily be able to talk about. I told you in the past that at the age of 40, I learned to ski with my boys. Sometimes for me as a pastor, it was an expensive sport. But when I think about the conversations that I had on the slopes with my boys during those very formative years of their lives, I realize that no other place would have done it. If I was home, we would have probably watched a movie, or some friends would have come by, or there would have been something at the church that demanded my attention. And those conversations just never would have taken place. Now, for some of you, it might be hiking, or it might be sports. When we were on vacation this past Christmas, my son took his boys golfing. I went along and walked the 18 holes. But as I watched them talking and laughing and high-fiving each other and interacting, something was going on that normally doesn't take place in the home. And so how are you doing on this one? The fun factor in your family. And then number 9, high-functioning families have traditions that they honor all the time. Now, the Bible teaches the importance of these. And why is it so important? It provides security. You see, it comes down to family members knowing every Thanksgiving, every Christmas, every New Year, every birthday, there are certain things that are going to happen. This past year, Christmas, we were in Hawaii. And all of us were feeling a little insecure on Christmas Day because our normal traditions were all thrown off. Not only was the temperature different, but the whole atmosphere of the day was different. Throughout the day, different ones would remark, even the children, it doesn't feel like Christmas. You see, healthy families have certain traditions. And you look forward to them. You plan on them. You're secure in the knowledge that it's going to happen. And those traditions mean a lot to the family member. Family members are willing to alter their schedules and to travel and to put out a lot of money just to participate in those traditions year after year after year. So how are you doing on that one? The key word would be memories. Making traditions and memories. Is it high, medium, or low in your family? And then number 10, high-functioning families reach out for help when progress is deadlocked because of some disagreement. In other words, high-functioning families know how to send out an SOS. Save our ship. My generation did not do well with this. The dad could be an alcoholic, the mom a raging controller. One child could be clinically depressed, another one bouncing off the walls. And nobody would say anything to anybody. They would scrub up, they would dress up, they'd go to church on Sunday, deceive everybody that things are fine, and then they'd go back home to their mess. And it was a generation where father and son would be at each other, where mom and dad were not getting along and heading for a divorce, and no one knew what to do. And an SOS never went out. It's a little better these days. There's many sources of help. And there's less of a stigmatism attached to some of these kinds of things. And whenever there's a deadlock in a high-functioning family, they'll go to a Christian counselor, or they'll go to church, or they'll go to the pastor, or they'll get a book, or they'll go to a seminar. But they declare that they need help. And so how's your family on this? High, medium, or not so good? It's very important for a healthy family. Now, you need to grade yourself. Your family now, or the one you grew up in. On a scale of 1 to 10, how are you in each of these areas? Number 1, irrational love. Each family member feeling treasured. Number 2, communication. In truth and grace. Family members feel free to talk to each other. What grade would you give it? Affirming the value, number 3, and uniqueness of each family member. Understanding each other, knowing that they're different. Number 4, bowing. Never to abuse or shame or control or intimidate a family member. Making each family member feel safe in these areas. Number 5, sharing a common belief system. God and His Word plays a central role in the family. Number 6, teaching respect for other people, accepting differentness. Number 7, instilling a sense of responsibility in each family member, holding each one accountable. Number 8, playing together and having fun. Number 9, making memories through certain traditions that you honor all the time. And number 10, reaching out for help when progress is deadlocked due to some disagreement, sending out an SOS. Now you can add the numbers up and divide by 10 and get a number as to the health level of your family. But more important than the overall score are the individual categories. If you have 7 to 9 on some of the categories, you're doing well, keep doing it. But if you have numbers less than 5, I challenge you to spring into action in those areas. Especially on that first point, where healthy families display irrational levels of love. You know, if you're low on that, you're sending love-starved kids out into a dangerous world. And you can't afford low levels on that. You need to let them know that you're crazy about them. Or that one on the same page spiritually. If you're low on that, you need to do something about it. Without God in the equation, you're going to be headed for ruin. Actually, if you're low in any of the categories, purpose to make a change. In closing, I read of some parents who lost their only son in a drowning accident when he was at the age of 17. And the mother said there were only 2 things that were keeping her from falling into the abyss. The first, she said, is to know that our son knew God and that he had his sins forgiven by Jesus Christ, so that I know right now he is in heaven. If I didn't know that, she said, I would be inconsolable. And the second, she said, is that I am not living with any parental regrets. There are no uncleared records between me and my son. And she said that is keeping my grip on sanity. Now I read that and I thought, wow, that's what I want with my family. No matter what happens, I want to know that they are in a right relationship with God through Jesus Christ. And I want to spend the rest of my life without any parental regrets, having nothing between us that I've never cleared up. Now those 2 things, being in right relationship with God through faith in Jesus Christ and no parental regrets, motivate me. And I want them to motivate you as well. And so make sure everyone in your family knows God and is rightly related to Jesus Christ. And let the church help you in that. And make sure that you don't have any parental regrets, that you never made right. And it can be a guideline in those areas. You know, it's never too late to improve as a family member. And I hope God will inspire you to do that in the year 2016. Let's pray. Father, thank you for the families that you have given us. Thank you for our spouse. Thank you for our children. And we know that each one has been uniquely designed for our family. And so I pray that you would give us an irrational love for each one. And I pray that we would be diligent to teach them about the things of God. And I pray that you would help us to preserve our families and to keep them from falling apart. And so I pray that we might be able to glean some things today that would help us and to make improvements and growth within them. And this I ask in Jesus' name.